Our food needs, our water needs, and our energy needs are actually some of the most critical factors contributing to this climate change around us. This is the challenge for humanity going forward. This was a main slogan of Tencent for many, many years: improve people's lives with the internet and the quality of life. We always had to think about our mission from the perspective of the value it was bringing people, because we fundamentally care about people. We fundamentally care about having a more peaceful world, a world in which you can see the quality of life improving for people.
Because quite frankly, to heat and cool cities with clean energy is not just an environmental problem, it's a health problem. It's even a life and death problem. The fossil fuel-based energy we use in cities is more dangerous to human lives than the COVID-19.
So I would say a critical principle of being a CXO is you start with the problem first. Can artificial intelligence make food production in greenhouses a game changer? Every single one outperform the humans. Some of the teams were twice as profitable than the human growers. I believe there's a whole new, almost you can call it like a revolution of applications that can become available, which can better tie in, the supply and demand of energy. It's an exciting future that we're heading towards if we can get it right.
The important message is the solutions already exist. We don't have to wait. We don't have to go to outer space.
Let's focus on improving life here. Let's not confuse that with a fascinating exploration of other planets, which is part of humanity. That's part of what we can do, and it pushes our science.
The big challenge that we face on the planet is how are we going to heat and cool, bring water and food to these mega cities without destroying the climate on the planet. We already see in my part of the world the evidence of the melting of the glaciers, how the Arctic sea ice is gradually disappearing, how the big ice sheet in Greenland is also melting. That means that all the coastal cities in Asia will no longer be livable. And one of the reasons why the ice is melting in my part of the world is the energy system that is being used, not just in Asia, but in every country in the world. So my message today to all of you is, for the first time in human history, we are not only living in times where over half of the global population lives in cities, but we are also living for the first time in an era where the energy system, the water system, the food system, and the climate system in Asia and in my part of the world close to the Arctic is all interrelated. And unless we realize this relationship and create energy policies, water policies, and food policies that recognize this interrelationship, we are heading for a gigantic trouble in the decades ahead.
I talk a lot about food, energy, and water. And I know this is a new concept, and some people are wondering why food, energy, and water, why few? This is kind of like a shortcut understanding of climate change. And to me, what I felt was missing from kind of like, let's call it the first generation of understanding about climate change, was that it was missing a lot of the complexity on Earth. But how do you introduce all this environmental, ecological complexity to people, where you're kind of saying you have to understand everything on the planet? I felt that at the end of the day, the most important relationships for people to think about and understand would be around food, energy, and water, and the relationships between each other. And the idea is this, that our food needs, our water needs, and our energy needs are actually some of the most critical factors contributing to this climate change around us. Everything from the type of diet that we choose, like do we eat a lot of meat or no meat, or the kind of energy we use to heat our homes. Many people don't know, for example, that perhaps 50%, quite commonly, 50% of a national energy budget is either for warming up a space, like in an office or a home, or cooling the space, like in a hot part of the world. Just to meet the human body temperature needs can be up to 50% of a national energy budget. So these needs around energy, food, and water, these are what's driving climate change.
The origin of the Arctic Circle was my realization 20 years ago that the northernmost part of the world, which some people call the top of the world, the ice-covered areas, Greenland and around the Arctic, which had for centuries been very remote, almost completely unknown to scientists or public in Europe, America, not to say Asia. This part was becoming crucial to the future of the planet. So I realized about 10, 12 years ago that if humankind, if people in Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas, were going to realize the great importance for their future of the Arctic, we had to create a big global platform. I sometimes said to people, we need the Davos of the Arctic. But let me also say that the Arctic Circle is also a new model of how we cooperate in the 21st century. The old model was that if you represent a government, you get a priority. Sometimes only formal representatives of states have the right to speak. We now in the 21st century live in a world where the informed young people, where the student activist can actually be more interesting than the old diplomat in terms of what they say. So when we constructed the Arctic Circle, we also introduced a new model for cooperation in the 21st century where everyone who comes, the young activist as well as the president of a country, has the same right to speak, has the same right to stand up and ask a question, has the same right to create a session. You have to listen to everybody. And I am very pleased not only that the Arctic Circle has succeeded in creating this huge international platform, but also we have proved that the new model of the 21st century actually works.
So I think this is actually a very, very important question. You have probably asked the most important question, which is why. And I think the why is really important for everyone in their lives, for every business. So as we continuously build on the Tencent mission, we're always thinking about, and let me talk about myself, how can the technologies that we develop have as much social value as possible? Because we fundamentally care about people. We fundamentally care about having a more peaceful world, a world in which you can see the quality of life improving for people. This was a main slogan of Tencent for many, many years: improve people's lives with the internet and the quality of life. We always had to think about our mission from the perspective of the value it was bringing people. You're going to run out of gas unless you fundamentally care about people, because you have to think about their needs. You have to empathize with them. So for me, when I started thinking about food, energy, and water, it really started from a period of time when I was thinking more as an executive of Tencent. What more can we do to meet the needs of people, the health needs that people have? How could we use the technologies that we know as really a computer science and telecommunications company? That's what we do with the internet. We combine software and telecommunications, and we bring these experiences together for our users. How can we have some unique value to add as a newcomer to these spaces? So we started thinking about these issues, but actually as Tencent, when we start thinking about something, we often learn by investing. So we do a lot of early stage investing, seed investing, to support founders and also to have a dialogue with them as we're trying to help them grow as a company. We can also learn about their discipline. And then I started seeing that actually There is so much work that should be done, research that should be done that isn't being done in these spaces. And so many of the disciplines weren't talking to each other, like I was saying in my earlier remarks. So all along, what I'm actually describing here is how I've been approaching a problem. And I've actually been talking more and more that I think this can be a strategy for CXOs. If other companies or even cities or other organizations wanted to have a CXO, I would say a critical principle of being a CXO is you start with the problem first, right? Now, our tool set in Tencent is technology, but you start with the problems. About 3 years ago, we started supporting a program in the Netherlands with a university called Wageningen, WUR. They're known to be one of the best universities in the world for agriculture, certainly a leader in Europe, very, very famous. And I flew over to the Netherlands from Silicon Valley to meet them. We came up with an idea. It started with a question: can artificial intelligence make food production in greenhouses a game changer? Can artificial intelligence outperform human beings in a greenhouse? I said, can we structure a contest that shows if the AI is successful, that we'll actually guarantee ourselves a better future, that we can all have more food at a lower cost with less resource use. Anyways, here's the point. Yesterday, we announced the second competition that we did. Here we are, middle of 2020, 2.5 years, 3 years after I first contacted them. All 5 AI teams outperformed the human growers in Wageningen according to a rigorous scientific process. It didn't matter so much what your AI strategy was, and some AI teams performed a lot better than others of the 5, but every single one outperformed the humans. Some of the teams were twice as profitable than the human growers. And the human grower team by far had the most waste. So it's all started with a question. We don't just wait for the market to react and someone else to do it. We have to make sure that we are creating those solutions. They must happen. Let's focus on it. Let's get it done. And I think this has been a clear, a great area for Tencent to work on. It totally applies very centrally to our AI strategy, and we're learning so much from it in many different ways. So this is an example I wanted to provide to you.
5, 10 years ago, even before, was that clean energy, replacing fossil fuel, coal and oil, would take maybe centuries. Clean energy, wind, solar, even geothermal was a niche phenomena, kind of boutique phenomena. But now, in the last 5 or 10 years, we have seen an enormous progress, which has made clean energy, every form of clean energy, geothermal, solar, wind, hydro, more competitive, cheaper, in economic and business terms, better than the old system of fossil fuel or even coal. In the last 10 years, has become the global leader in almost every form of clean energy. If it wasn't for the Chinese contribution to solar and wind, electric cars and other forms, we would not have solar and wind with the competitive prices as we have today. Because quite frankly, to heat and cool cities with clean energy is not just an environmental problem. It's a health problem. It's even a life and death problem. Last year, 7 million people died in the world for urban pollution. We talk a lot about the deaths from coronavirus. And it might be brutal to say it, but so far the people who have died from COVID-19 is a small part of those who die every year from urban pollution. The fossil fuel-based energy we use in cities is more dangerous to human lives than the COVID-19. I know it's a startling statement, but it is a fact. You can become a Chinese millionaire, even a Chinese billionaire, but you still have to breathe the polluted air, like the poorest of the people have to breathe. And one of the primary reasons for how Norway and Iceland have become so rich and affluent and people live such a good life in our countries, is moving away from the old system of energy in terms of our own countries over to the new clean energy system.
Part of the challenge for everywhere on Earth is how do we move to renewable energy systems? And it can feel like a huge task, especially I think that the size of the task or the challenge that one perceives, I do believe in part relates to the amount of territory they're trying to manage. Because at the end of the day, when a nation thinks about making an energy transformation, to me, it's the aggregation of many local strategies. So each region in the world has natural attributes that will be very suitable for generating energy from these natural resources. What natural traits do we have that can help us meet our energy needs? So there's this one question, which I've just been addressing now, which is really about power generation, okay? When I talk about geothermal versus nuclear, this is all about the power source. Then you have another issue, which is more national in nature, not so much local, but more national, which is grids. With the right grid, you can move that energy throughout the country, potentially. And you can invest in that. So to me, there's this question, if a nation state or a region wants to have a strong grid strategy or a weak grid strategy. With a strong grid strategy, if I could use that term, you can actually move around large amounts of energy across a region. And therefore, you could have parts of the country that are providing the energy needs for many other parts. If you have a weak grid, then you need to have much more local power generation for a certain targeted outcome. I believe there's a whole new, almost you can call it like a revolution of applications that can become available, which can better tie in, the supply and demand of energy. So you're basically trying to optimize the use of green energy by timing and sequencing your energy needs that use more and more of your energy to the availability of green energy in the grid. But the exciting thing when we think about this future that we are heading towards is we can find scenarios where there's more and more nations like Iceland that actually have an abundance of energy and can think about how can we apply that abundant energy towards further applications that improve human life. Maybe we should grow more kinds of food, maybe more fruits, fun stuff, whatever it may be. We can around the world increasingly have a luxury of asking that question. We actually have too much energy right now. What can we do that's positive for humanity to take advantage of that? It's an exciting future that we're heading towards if we can get it right. I actually think the bigger barrier is not so much about making the investments in new power generation approaches. I think the bigger issue is really this question of what do you do about the existing assets, and do you do an investment in a new facility? So if your goal is to shut down something that already exists and do more investment in a new type of facility, there's obviously a question. Do we have the money for that? Do we invest in the capital to do that plant? But then also a question, what do we do about the existing facility? It has owners, it has people that work there. It's kind of part of a local culture. It's been there for 50 years or 100 years. How do we handle this event? And that can be a very difficult decision. Culturally, it can. In terms of jobs, it can. In any case, for a city, just from a pure economic perspective, and I'm kind of answering this question more as a businessman than someone who cares about our planet and the ecology. I'm just saying, if you look at it from a pure business, in one case, you do the upfront investment, and then you end up with very low marginal cost energy, like wind or solar. When that wind is blowing, you're not spending more. Or you stick with the old assets and you deal with the old problems, the old pollution. Of course, we know the issues are many with that, and also the costs. And I think it can be really hard for people to develop the budgets and the case to do the investments and deal with the others that own the existing assets and those problems. That, I would say, this dynamic is something that's quite important to think about and understand.
5, 10 years is the world is very open to new ideas. Yes, we still have states on the basis of the old diplomatic political model. Yes, you still have ignorance or hostility or opposition. But the good news is the track record of new ideas being able to transform the world is now so strong that I could even say there is no barrier out there that is going to stop this big river of new ideas to transforming the world. Even the fact that we are talking today in the way we are talking, and there are people listening in China and other parts of the world, and there are people who can ask us questions. I think the track record is new ideas are running forward in a big river, and I don't see anything out there that is going to stop.
The question is, how do we actually implement things in the real world? Because there's often great ideas, a lot of theories, but how do we actually see action? I agree, it's a real problem. For example, let me tell you what I think the answer is, because it's too obvious. You have to set your goals, first of all, but it has to be very specific. And I find in some cases, it's clear what a region needs to do or an organization needs to do for one or two things, but when they start getting out of those one or two things, it's often less and less clear. But the first thing is to be really clear on what you are trying to do, be specific and take the time to specify those things. The second thing is also, I think, very obvious. You need to appoint responsible people to get something done. So often that sounds easy, but I find in practice, it's often not solved, which is why I'm raising it here. It sounds very obvious, but the world often, we find it's messy out there, and often there aren't people responsible. Finally, I think once you have your responsible person for solving that challenge, they need to be available, reachable by the private sector, by businesses, by researchers, individuals, investors. You need to be able to find them, to interact, to propose a solution to them.
It is unfortunate that in the third pole Himalayan region, we do not have systematic cooperation between India, China, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, or the other countries. And that is why I have made various efforts to bring the third pole countries, the Himalayan countries, together. We have created sessions at the Arctic Circle. We even organized a conference in Dehradun in India. And next year, we will have a conference in Abu Dhabi, hosted by the Arctic Circle and the government of the UAE, to talk about what are the lessons from the Arctic that the Himalayan countries can learn. That is why I am using the Arctic example to say to the countries in the third pole Himalayan regions, you need a third pole circle, like we have the Arctic Circle. Because I think it is very interesting that the Arctic Circle and the government of the United Arab Emirates are coming together and saying to Pakistan, India, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and the others, come to this new table. And we invite all of our friends in the third pole countries, including China, to attend.
I think there's many things we can do, both in China and around the world. So it really depends how. So the problem with these climate challenges is sometimes we can identify that the world has a need before people know that they have the need. I think, therefore, it's important that we have more dialogues with scientists like yourself, researchers, decision makers, be they in the, a water utility, whether that's a private business or government run, to continuously talk about the challenges and be there to support each other, not just financially, but also intellectually. So I think the first step is really working together to identify challenges and then getting more faster market validation to reward companies who try to address the risk with solutions. Because if we don't hear any market demand or market appreciation as a company very sensitive to market feedback, we may misinterpret the signal as being that we're not developing the right product or we're not focused on the right problem, when the real problem was there weren't enough people aware of the issue or talking about it. I actually don't even just like to focus on technology. I focus on next generation technology, the new stuff, the stuff that is coming right out of the lab or something that's a breakthrough. But you're right. There's so much we can do. You could address the greenhouse gas emissions problem just by if the planet was to eat less beef, maybe you go from having beef at every meal to once a week. We might do speeches. We might support certain initiatives, videos or movies or books, writing. And that is probably the most powerful lever we have at the end of the day, to be aware of how our actions affect the environment, and then being willing to make some changes to what we do every day. So I think this is actually really important, and I would want to emphasize that. It's just as important as embracing the new technology.
I think it's very difficult to map out in great detail what you would do in many other countries. What we have seen in the last 2 or 3 months is that each and every country finds a way that suits its social traditions, its political system, its information system. We in Iceland, for example, we have been able to deal with this very successfully. But when it started in March, we were not so sure. But we were able to be very innovative in the way we solved it. We appealed to the inner wisdom of peoples. And that is something you need to apply to other countries as well, that the strongest force is to mobilize the people themselves. We saw that in China as well. You saw a national effort that mobilized the Chinese population. Whereas technology can help, whereas medical science can help, it is still about people. All the solutions to these big problems have to mobilize the people, because without cooperation from each and every individual, we are not going to succeed. So to believe too strongly that technology will solve the problem is perhaps not the best way forward. I have full respect to what technology can offer, but it is still fundamentally about people. The fact of the matter is we have all the solutions. And secondly, we need to realize that each and every one of us can execute them. We don't have to wait for big governments or big companies to execute them. The beauty of the technological revolution in both clean energy and information technology and others is that each and every one of us can execute these solutions. We don't have to wait. We don't have to go to outer space. Don't just stand there and look up to space and wait for something to come from heaven. Start executing the change here now, because you already have the power and the technology to do so.
We can a little bit, because what it should be doing is it should be helping us to realize what a special planet Earth is. This is a very special planet, and we've been very specially evolved to survive on it. Compared to exploring other planets and figuring out how to live there, it's a lot easier to just get a few more things right here on Earth. So I would say, let's focus on improving life here. Let's not confuse that with a fascinating exploration of other planets, which is part of humanity. That's part of what we can do, and it pushes our science. I would say be clear on your targets and get to work step by step. Focus on it, focus on action. Nothing should be holding you back. There's so many people that want to get involved and help, but set your goals, put together a team, someone responsible, and get to work.
We now live in a world where the future of China depends on the future of the Arctic, and the future of the Arctic depends on the future of China. And unless we realize that we're all connected in this way, we will destroy the planet, our home, in the coming decades.